Okay, great. So I'm Andrew O'Donnell from Orford Hall Monaghan Morris, and I'm going to talk about Belgrove House. So this project is located in King's Cross in London, and it's actually directly across from King's Cross Station and St Pancras on Euston Road. This project has the unique distinction of facing 3 Grade 1 listed projects, which in the UK is the highest level of heritage protection afforded to a scheme. The first one being King's Cross, and then St Pancras Station, and then the British Library further down the road. Now, all 3 of these buildings are vast in scale and have a powerful monumental quality on Euston Road. And our site is directly on the other side of the road, at the north end of Bloomsbury, as it translates into King's Cross. The brief for this building was life science-led mixed use, and it was very clear from the outset that our building needs to have a very strong character on the other side of the road to address the strength of the buildings directly across. And this is the view that you encounter as you leave King's Cross Station. We were directly influenced by Cairns, Richard's Medical Research Laboratories, in terms of this idea of served and servant space and a strong vertical expression of services within the building. The building does also have a lighter character in that there's a series of operable blinds around the upper echelons of it that can be transformed to respond to climate and has a kind of very bright yellow that sits within that layer. This building forms part of the Emergent Knowledge Quarter within London. It has 2 universities, the Crick Institute, the Wellcome Institute, and important proximity to University College London Hospital, just off the scene. It also has, in addition to the Grade 1 listed buildings, a whole series of other heritage protections, including other Grade 2 listed buildings around it, as well as a conservation area. The building was originally built as a tram shed at that time when London had trams in the 30s. And you can see it here as part of the kind of previous incarnation of King's Cross, which has been a place of great change over the last 15 years. And what's happened as Argent's knowledge-led regeneration of the King's Cross area has kind of pulled the center of gravity of this area north and actually away from the stations. So we clearly saw that our project had this opportunity to pull some of that activity and life and thinking back towards the station. There was a very long planning process on this project, and we were actually encouraged by English Heritage to produce a 21st century building, something that captured the sorts of thinking and ideas that will inform the economy of the future, but something inspired by the thinking that underpinned the development of the railway and an engineering-led approach to the buildings. And this is a section through King's Cross Station by Cubits. Our site has a very close proximity to the Circle Line, and there was always this opportunity to make more of that connection into the surrounding infrastructure. Funnily enough, the site was also used by Oasis to record a supersonic in 1994. Part of Camden's planning requirements was to provide housing on the site as well, but it became clear that would provide substandard housing and also compromise the life science use within it. So our client purchased another site in close proximity to where we were to enable us to design purpose-built housing on the other site, which is Acorn House, which includes 33 affordable homes and also an element of affordable workspace so that small and medium enterprises can also stay within this area where there's been a vast escalation in rent. We took the opportunity to use reclaimed materials from the demolished tram shed, and we were able to reclaim about 75% of the bricks, and they're going to be mixed into the facade of Acorn House, which is the affordable housing. What was very key within the life science brief was being able to celebrate the activities within the building, particularly around the lower levels where the laboratories are. So this high degree of visibility within the central portions framed by the vertical masonry was key. The building has 2 levels of basement, very significant provision of plant, and a very high level of bicycle parking. There's then a multi-use ground level. There was always this idea that there would be a very public offering within the building. There's then 3 levels of laboratory, collaboration space, which is where people undertaking research within the building can gather and trade notes, and then 4 levels of office, which is the upper level of the building. The area immediately to the south is occupied by a square and is very sensitive in context. So the building steps down very dramatically on this side, also includes 4 balconies, which result in a recessed facade and solar protection to this elevation. Great. And as the way that works in terms of build-up is you have the lower level of the laboratories. The next tier up, the top floor of the collaboration space, is set back to provide very generous outdoor terraces. There is then an extension of the greenery of the square up into an elevated condition at the southern end of the building. And then the offices, which is a CLT hybrid structure, form the upper levels, and then roof plant, including photovoltaics, on-site renewables through there. So this is the section. The entrance to the underground on this side of the road is actually serviced by a series of pop-ups at the moment. So there was an opportunity to bring the entrance to the station within our building, to embed it into this important piece of infrastructure within the city, and create a new, more generous, more accessible entrance to the station. By then removing the pop-ups, also created more open, free-flowing public realm in this very heavily used part of the street. And this is the new entrance to the station and lift that's being provided. There is another entrance to the building, which directly comes off the square. We worked with Bradley Hall Schonach as the landscape architects, and they've undertaken a whole rebuilding of drainage and introducing sustainable drainage through the square and this section, and we've also been able to stop up some of the roads. So there's access to an education center, which forms part of the open ground floor use for Belgrove House. And this is geared around having school visits to come in and also for local community use. So MSD Merck are the major tenant who signed a 15-year lease on the project. And this is a really important part of their outreach in terms of making people aware of what goes on within the building. There's also a large lecture space, which they use, but can also be booked by local community organizations who they've already started to foster relationships with. There's also an exhibition space where they will give displays about some of the research being taken within the building. This project has been in design for about 6 years and was one of the first projects where we really deeply interrogated embodied carbon within how the building was put together, which, as we know, makes up to a third of the total carbon emissions. This is some work done by EcoMotion in the US, and this is a way of visualizing the impact of our buildings in terms of carbon. So that's 1 ton of CO2. And this 7,000 tons is all of the carbon we save in the shift from where we've got to, which is 575 tons of CO2 per square meter. And this is the total amount of saving. Has to be said, that is also the total impact of the building, and it illustrates why, as collectively, we have to halve that and then halve that again very quickly. It's a 10-meter grid, which suits the laboratories, carried up to avoid transfers into the upper levels. As I said, CLT hybrid just on the upper levels. The labs need a much stiffer slab. And in terms of services, air is pulled in from the cleaner air at the back of the site, processed in the basement, filtered to a very high level for the basement, for the laboratories, and then discharged at high level. The offices, we're able to use a mixed mode ventilation system. But obviously in winter, it also operates kind of fully sealed. This is the operable blind system that runs across the offices. There is also internal blinds within the laboratories. This is the character of the building looking across from King's Cross Station. And this is one of the flank elevations where you can see the vertical masonry piers that deal with the services, and then a series of winter gardens inserted with the lightweight glazing between them. This is a full mock-up of the upper levels. Where on site, we have a further 1.5 years to go on this project. And this reveals some of the operable elements within the building. So there's a 3-layer winter garden. So there's glass louvers, and we're working with our landscape architects to develop a biophilic strategy, which will allow light in winter, but the plants will further bloom and create an extra layer of solar protection to the spaces. And this is a shot of the mock-up, and you can see it with the blinds down. And we're really looking forward to the way that the facade of the building will change over time as it sits across the day. The glazing behind has a timber backbox, so composite system, and that's been one of the key strategies to reduce the embodied carbon within it. It actually gives a lovely soft character to the internal spaces within the office. This is in the elevation of the building, fronting onto the elevated square, which is available for use for the occupants of the building. And then this is this very generous external space where you can enjoy the view across to the Grade 1 listed kind of buildings, the affordable housing, and then the building at night. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. A really thorough presentation on full aspect of the project. I want to ask you about the Louis Kahn reference. The Richards Medical Lab is widely beloved by architects, not so much by scientists, because it didn't afford the flexibility that they need. And he went with a very different approach, a few years later in California. Tell me about how you applied that lesson.
I mean, I think there were two things. One was taking the services to the outside of the building and expressing them. You would have seen on the floor plates, they are actually very, very flexible open floor plates. It's also contained within one of those elements is the vertical circulation. So apart from the columns, you have near limitless flexibility across the floor plate. So it's a very different model to that, but there was something in the kind of muscular, monumental quality of those vertical shafts that we felt was important to give the building the kind of visual mass that it needed in its location, particularly with what it was fronting.
Question. The relationship between the office component to the lab component, is it visualized or in real estate terms that the same tenant would have both kinds
it
of
is.
floors?
So MSD Merck have taken the entire
whole
building.
building.
So
Okay.
And it was initially designed kind of open source, so they weren't there from the outset of the project. They came on board about halfway through the planning process, and that then started to inflect the design to the kind of culture of their company and the way that they wanted to occupy it. And that particularly manifested itself in the ground floor and how they started to build up their outreach program, and that started to drive the types of spaces that we were providing within that level of the building.
Great presentation, thank you. It's very clear. It's a site I know very well. I mean, the comment about it not being suitable for housing, I'm a bit surprised you managed to get it off-site, given that's a residential square. But actually, what I was curious about is, given its use, and once you've got to the point where there isn't going to be resi, it's a very particular aesthetic, and I get the reference to the Kahn and bricks. Obviously, there's lots of bricks around there. But the oriel windows and the kind of very vertical brick pillars, the separation is to do with scale, I get that. What's driving that kind of oriel and brick aesthetic? Because I don't see it particularly in the surroundings. I mean, I like it, but I'm just curious where it came from.
It was a very long planning process, and we were actually surprised by the strong support for the idea of the building that we had from English Heritage. And it was actually them who challenged us to develop more of a universal building approach rather than something that was specifically contextual in terms of its expression. So that was really driven by a kind of inside-out design and levels of light and transparency and visibility, both from the outside, being able to see into the laboratories, as well as the quality of light and experience of being within it. So it is actually, the massing is completely driven by context, but the expression of the building was actually more driven by engineering and the system of the building, which is what we're encouraged to do, sort of more in response to what was across the road, rather than to the south in Bloomsbury.
Remarkably forward-looking for HE.
Yes, I mean, I think there were a few of us falling off our chairs when we heard that, but it was very welcome as well. Maybe there should be more of it. I mean, it is interesting when you look at these Victorian buildings that we have, and, you know, when they built those stations, they just completely destroyed everything that was there. But now we are sort of required to kind of accommodate them in a different way.
I would like to ask a question about context, because I don't know very well this part of the world. I don't know the city at all, but I see a contrast between the first images that you show and this one, where you see pretty much vibrant life happening. And I would like to understand maybe the connection between the life in the neighborhood and how that complements with this building, because what I like about it is sort of mixed-use quality, and it seems very connected to that neighborhood. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about it.
So this side of the building is very much the hard-working public face, which is the address. I don't know the passenger numbers for King's Cross Station, but between it and St Pancras, they're two of the busiest stations in London. So this area and that square, particularly during the working week, but also on weekends, are incredibly busy with a huge amount of life and activity of all sorts. The area to the south, which is predominantly residential, is much quieter. And that's where this idea about having a community entrance to the building, which is how you access the community facilities, would actually face back towards the community that MSD would be looking to build connections to. So, for example, the nearest school that they want to build a relationship with is actually more down in kind of Bloomsbury. So there was a sense about this idea of address, that it was a building that would face two ways, and the parts of the building that you would access from the kind of busier, hardworking station fronting would be different to the kind of program that was oriented back towards the community and Bloomsbury. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
So I would assume that goes with sort of mixed-use quality and the fact that it seems that you want to attract people, from the neighborhood to come.
Yeah, no, very
engage
much.
with the
For
building.
so if there's a local community group which is based in Bloomsbury, they will be able to book that exhibition space that I showed. Great.
Small question for clarification. On the ground level, are there more than these entrances on this side, or when you walk around both streets, are there other entrances,
there's
other ways
not-
of entering the building?
So there's the front door here that takes you into kind of Merck and the lobby and visitors, and then the community entrance is located to the south, fronting onto the square. There were versions of the scheme where we did try and integrate retail into the side streets to have more active frontage indoors, but it simply started to conflict with the kind of public use and offer that that Merck wanted to provide. So no, but there is visibility in, so there is active frontage, but there aren't additional front doors on the two flank elevations.
And I've got a similar question to Tracy's question about the brick facade. It seems overly monumental. Can you talk a little bit about why did you thought about taking it all the way to the roof instead of dealing with what you seem to show in the sections, which is a programmatic clear difference between the lower part and the upper part?
Yeah. I mean, there was lots of testing of different iterations, and I think through the process we did feel that having that monumentality and scale was appropriate for it. Around the side, those actually terminate at the terrace level and actually become a seat that you can sit on as part of it. And we actually felt that was quite a nice moment of this kind of very strong service-led gesture that then becoming something which can be inhabited and used by people.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.